I'm not saying they're bad people, but at the end of the day, like how they identify is you go to a doctor, you say I'm depressed. They don't even talk to you about your problem. They just say here's antidepressants, and it's how they make money, So, but it's also their job. I don't necessarily mean that, I don't agree with that. The other thing I don't agree with, because I come from a family of addiction, is going into rehab and institutionalizing someone. It's a difficult conversation that I unfortunately have to have, because most of my family members have all been in treatment centres. But what had happened in that treatment centre was they'd go in with one problem, then they get institutionalised, they'd be around people that have even worse problems. Then they were in rooms, and I was in a room where it was like 4 walls. How's that going to make me any happy? It's going to make me more depressed. And then I get even more institutionalised, and then I come out of even more problems. And actually, I think the cure to addiction is connection and environment.
Yeah, I think environment's a huge one.
Huge one.
Huge one. And I was talking about this with Nick on the podcast we did as well. You've got to be super careful about who you're spending your time with. And if you hang around really negative people, you're going to take on and absorb all of that energy. And on a subconscious level, I don't think we have any clue really just how much that can impact us, right?
100%. And it's really interesting, because as the years have gone on in my recovery and my understanding of my truth, is the more consciously aware I am, by being sober and, working on myself, being authentic, because I talk a lot about authenticity and going back to what actually truly makes me happy, the more aware I am. And the more aware I am, the more susceptible I am to energies and people and things and places. And that's essentially why people end up drinking and doing drugs, or avoiding situations, because they don't want to feel that energy, because it actually makes them feel. And it's like, these are all armors and coping mechanisms to try and block off how we actually really feel, or what we can actually take in. But the more you accept the energy, and you accept that actually it's not my energy. So it's really funny, because when I went into rehab, I got slapped this book, and I was like, well, what is this book? And it was called Facing Codependency by Pia Melody. Have you heard about her? No. So she's a huge therapist, and she was a therapist in the Meadows in Arizona, and she talks a lot about codependency. She talks a lot about enmeshment. Do you know the word enmeshment? Yeah. So you could be in a household of people, and literally you're enmeshed with every single person, and you actually stop feeling your feelings. And to the point where you actually don't know what your feelings are. You don't know what your decisions are. You don't know what you want in life. And I think there's a lot of enmeshment in this world, in societies and communities, where we actually stop to actually realise what we actually want. And how we actually feel. So I talk a lot about that, because when you take a step back and you actually kind of, ask yourself what you really want. And we spoke about this outside. We said to each other, everything that I thought was going to make me happy in my life, that I got told that was going to make me happy in my life, by the age of 11, you have to go to, school, you have to be popular, you have to have loads of friends, you have to do well at school, you have to get a degree, you have to go to university, you have to come out, you have to have a really, really good job, you have to work your way up, make loads of money. That didn't make me happy. But when I took a step back and I started to have awareness, and ask myself the questions of how I truly was happy, that was when I realised that actually my life is not conventional, but actually it's what makes me happy. And it's when you take a step back from that codependency and enmeshment.
Yeah, and that's a huge point, because I do feel like now more than ever we've got so many distractions and all these different types of information that we think we know what we want based on our conditioning and societal expectations, but is that really what we want? And I think that's why a lot of us are so out of aligned and out of touch with reality. Is because we don't actually ever take the time to understand what we truly want, right? Well,
no, I was just about to say, do you know what it stems from? Do you know what it stems from?
I would say lack of self-esteem.
I love it. You just literally answered my question. I love it.
I think always. I think, and that, I'm talking from personal experience, right? Because I had very low self-esteem when I was younger, and again went through the same thing at school. Didn't really fit in. I was kind of always the weird kid, always low self-esteem. And what happened was I ended up building up confidence, but it was more like my ego was becoming stronger. I don't think I was it wasn't because I was living in tune with my core values and who I was, who my soul was. It was more, right, I've built up all these layers, so for me, I suddenly found worth in my achievements as a sportsman. Suddenly, being a good goalkeeper, I could get the validation from other people. Suddenly, I was accepted almost, and I sort of gained respect of other people. So my worth was tied to being a goalkeeper, for example. That's the earliest thing I can remember. And what would happen is if I made a mistake in a game, because a goalkeeper, it's like, if you make a mistake, then
Yeah, it's
everyone
all on
knows
you.
about it. It's all on you. So what do you think happened when I made a mistake in a game? I was distraught. I was so upset. And I think at the time, you might think, okay, it's normal, you know, who wouldn't be upset there? But no, it affected me to my core. And I think it's because my ego, my identity was destroyed in that moment. Because without the goalkeeping, it was like, who am I? And you could apply that to so many areas of life. I think, like you said, we look for this external stuff. And what you grow up believing, it's possessions, it's women, it's especially for guys, right? And then you realize you're just following what society wants, but what society wants isn't necessarily what's best for you. And a lot of the time, I think we're all just following what society wants from following the crowd. But a lot of the time, society's values are, from my subjective experience, is just a bit fucked up.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I don't think it's changed, and it won't change. And, you know, like at the end of the day, I think that when you start to step out and you started to, you know, really kind of go back to what your values are, and I talk a lot about values and alignment with what your values and alignment are, the more you can truly become happy in that, you know. But it's about trusting your journey. Like, look how much pressure you would put on yourself to be that goalkeeper, to be perfect, right? And that's where a lot of my addiction and my eating disorders and my bulimia and my drinking and my using and my, you know, trying to think that I was like the most perfect person in the world came from. It was, I had to literally show to the world that I was this, you know, this person. Because if I was this person, then I was liked and I was accepted. And you spoke about self-esteem and self-worth. Yes, self-esteem and self-worth, 100%. But it's also, we're so scared to be rejected. Because we run in packs, you know, when you look at the mammal days and you look at, you know, when we were, you know, in the caveman days, we all run in communities. And when you're in a community, you feel love. When you're not in a community, you don't know how to love yourself because you don't know how to love yourself. And when you don't know how to love yourself, it's almost like you look for external validation to get that love. And I see it all the time. And growing up, all I wanted was that external validation because I didn't love myself. To have the truth of actually being able to go, I'm okay today. And it's okay if that person doesn't like me. I'm 31 years old and I'm still figuring that out, right? I'm figuring out that not everyone likes me. And it's bloody hard because I try to be the nice person in the world and still not everyone likes me. But actually, it's okay. And it's a freeing experience to actually accept that, you know, not everyone likes you and actually you are okay by just loving yourself fully. And that's a lifelong journey. It really is a lifelong journey. And I don't think that anyone truly really gets it.
Well, this is one of those classic things. You hear about it since the first time you heard about self-development, right? But I don't think it fully clicks for a while, and it's very easy, I think, with a lot of concepts, right? But you say, I don't, you know, it's not about, it doesn't matter what people think about you. Okay, you say it, you hear that, but no, you still feel it.
I think the truth is everyone cares what people think about them, 100%.
Especially when you start off. I mean, I'd like to think, well, even now, you know, I'd like to think, you know, I just do not give a fuck. And, you know, if people want to say something, it's like, that's fine, because I know either we're not aligned or they're projecting their own insecurities.
It's always projecting their own insecurities.
Well, that's it. And but like you said, I think it takes a while to get there. And I think you've almost got to go through that discovery through your own experience. I think you can listen to all these sort of podcasts and stuff and take little nuggets of wisdom. But I think until it's lived experience, and we discuss this as well, like, do you necessarily have to go through a really tough time to find the true answers? And because I think there might be instances where you've had a really incredible upbringing, right? But I think the chances of that, the chances that you've had perfect upbringing is like almost zero, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder if you almost have to go through these really dark times in order to really embody that realization of, okay, it doesn't actually matter about all this external stuff.
100%, 100%. And I fully believe that every dark moment that I've been through has been like I was just interviewed for this thing called the Sober Summit, and the discussion that I'm talking about, the topic that I'm talking about, is like using pain to purpose. And you know, when you go through painful things, and you know, at the time you can't get out of it. Like there was a period of time within my depression and my drinking and my binge eating, because that came aligned with it, and then my bulimia, where I actually didn't think I was going to escape from that. I actually convinced myself that was my life, and I would end up being in bed for days in that hole of depression and self-harm. And when you get out of that, and when you know, live the life that I live now, I'm not saying that I have the most perfect life, but I live a normal life. You know, my life growing up was not normal, very unnormal life. But now I look at the beauty in the world of like, what actually is it? And I look at the world as like, I wake up, I actually can think and feel. I go by my day without drinking and doing drugs and being bulimic. I put my head in the pillow. I'm a success today. And that's what I see as success from someone that's been through pain. And there may be people that don't relate to this because they've never been through what I've been through, but this is the beauty of the world. And yet again, we were discussing before that like, there is no, and I want to say this, there is no right or wrong way of how to live your life. And I go back home and I have people always saying to me, oh, why don't you have a boyfriend? You're 31 years old, you know? Like, and that's like the distinctive thing on the way that they see happiness. And I'm not judging or whatever, but I don't see it like that. I see it as like, I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm living my dream, I'm doing everything I want to do. That is what truly makes me happy. There's no right or wrong way, but that's their reality. And my reality is my whole life is incredible and full. And there is no right or wrong way with how to live and be, as long as you are truly going to bed at night knowing you are happy and not living a lie. I was living a lie for many years. I would go out clubbing and I'd host tables in big clubs in London. I was a size 8 at the time. I was wearing dresses and heels, pretty girl. I was modelling. I was surrounded by models. And every single night I was going home and drinking and throwing up. And the reason why I share that is because what you see on outside is completely different to what you see on the inside. And I can honestly say that today because I'm not living a lie anymore. You know, I can hand on say to you, nothing I do in my life is a lie, but I do that by being authentic to who I am, right? Because I don't have any shame in saying that I'm struggling. I, in the last month, had 3 deaths around me, and I had to put someone really close to me in rehab. And the first thing I did was say that I was struggling. And I picked up the phone and I spoke about it. And even now, I still say that I'm struggling. I'm not drinking, I'm not doing drugs, I'm not being bulimic, I'm not acting out, but I'm not processing things well. But the reason why I'm sharing this is that the more you start to normalize that it's okay to not be okay, and normalize that there's no right or wrong way to how to deal with life and how to do things, that's when you start to talk about your truth. Because how do you connect with people? You connect by talking your truth. If you're not talking your truth, you're not connecting. And that was me from the ages of 11 to the ages of 18. Even 21, I would say, before I went back into rehab second time, it was all a lie. But my life was all about the external. It was about how much money I can make, how many boyfriends I could date, what type of person that I was hanging out with, you know, what car I can drive, what cool thing on Instagram that I can promote. That was my life. But behind closed doors, I was terrified to be true. But because I wasn't living my authentic truth and realizing actually the only way you truly be happy is by working on the inside rather than the outside.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I wonder how people can make that realization, because I've used this term quite a few times now of, right, delusionally happy. Maybe you're getting your external needs met, right? Maybe, like you said, in your case, it was getting male attention or whatever it may be, having a car, whatever. So I wonder, right, how can people decipher between, okay, I'm getting all my external needs met and I think I'm happy, versus okay, you know what, I'm really filled with joy and a real sense of fulfillment and happiness. I've got my own sort of views on it, but I would love to hear if you had any insight with that, because I'm sure there were points during that, even when you were bulimic perhaps, where you just thought you were in a good place.
Yeah, and I think I was, in a good place when I was on a high, right? And there's two types of high. There's the intrinsic true happiness that you get that isn't dopamine, that we get from alcohol and drugs and food and relationships and men and the things that give us this extrinsic high. But then the true high, which is the natural high. And I think it all comes from acceptance, and acceptance that we're not always going to be truly happy. The reason why I share that I'm truly happy is because I have perspective. And, you said about, how do people get like that? And I think it's about the perspective you have on different situations, things. I think that when you go through a really dark place and you hit rock bottom, and then you start to look at your thinking and the way that you think about things, I look at life in a way of perspective. So when I have a situation in my life, like the one that I've gone through in the last month or two, which has been really difficult, is I look at the perspective of it. And rather looking at the negatives, I look at the positives. And I'm not saying anything that's positive has happened, but I try and look at the joy in dealing with that situation in the right way. But only that person knows if they're truly happy. But at the end of the day, you can be happy and sad at the same time, and you can also go through suffering, and you can also go through a really, really amazing time at very similar times. But it's about looking at the majority of the time you're actually living that true joy and true happiness. I think that if majority of your time you're drinking and doing drugs and you're, acting out, and then you're going from this like, oh my God, I'm loving my life, to like, I hate my life, from a come down. If you were to think about it, it's not healthy. When you're smooth sailing, and I talk about the equilibrium, where you're kind of like, living your truth, not having external things to make you happy, you're, accepting things, and you're just dealing with situations, the emotional regulation that you have, and you're just taking each day as it is, that's living the balance and the alignment. So I always say to people that, like, if it's a problem and you're having this like up and down non-stop and you're constantly depressed and you're happy, you're not truly happy. It's about, really kind of just being in that smooth sailing. Motivation, actually, it's about taking a step back. I always say to people, take the time out, take a step back and assess situations. It's very easy in Bali to do that, because you can put yourself in Tabanan and, put yourself in Canggu is not the one, but Ubud, and, start to actually really sit to feel your feelings. In London, it's very difficult. Crazy city is very difficult. But when you take a step back and you actually start to identify, where you want to be in your life, how you really feel, it gives you that opportunity to make that decision. But yeah, like, I don't know, like, what really helped me and what I talk to my clients about is, I talk to them about journey. The journey is not about the future, right? We cannot control the future. I got offered a job when I was 21 to move to Hong Kong. I didn't know I was going to get offered a job to move to Hong Kong. I didn't know that I was going to literally at the age of 30 get up and leave my full-time job and move to Bali. I just did, right? So we cannot control the future. The past is something that we cannot change. We learn from our past. I think hindsight is the most beautiful thing. To become resilient as human beings, right? We need to know that actually in the past we've been able to conquer things. I was able to conquer the deaths that I went through because I know that I've done it before. But in order for us to truly, truly work on ourselves is by truly being in the now. So I say to a lot of my clients that, like, fear is driven by things that we worry about in the future. But actually all we've got is the now. And that's why, like, the practice of meditation and breath work and Kundalini yoga and sitting and just sitting in our moments and just chilling is so important. And I think that's the key to life, pretty much.
I think it's the number one most important thing, based off of my own experience, but also speaking on the podcast and hearing you just say it now. I think just spending time alone is
so hard. So hard.
but it's so important.
So important.
Actually, I think it actually becomes easier over time, because then you start really enjoying your own company and you realize how powerful it is. But I think you've got to, it's almost like a discipline thing, I think, just really making that time for yourself, because it's very easy, especially when we have low self-esteem, to always want to be busy and be out with people. And, you know, we're talking before this about sort of exercise addiction, you know, and all these different things, or you hear about sort of work addictions as well, distracting. And I think making that time is super important. You touched upon a great thing there of perspective. And I think that is a mindset shift that I think needs to happen almost from my own experience, right? Like you said, there's going to be points in your life where, yeah, you're going to have difficult months, right? Like 3 people passing away and all this stuff. Maybe you've lost your job, maybe your relationship has ended. But it's about, okay, I think a lot of resistance comes because we try and resist these things and resist the emotions that come. Whereas rather than trying to resist these emotions, why not just change our relationship with them?
Yeah.
And then that way you're not always trying to, you know, shove them down. And I think it's just an inevitable part of life. I think we're so privileged, right? We have the opportunity for however many years it is, could be 25 years, could be 80, could be 100, doesn't matter. We've got the opportunity to experience the human form of what we are, which means we can experience the depth of human emotion. And I think it's beautiful. And it's just changing our relationship with that, because then even now when I have like challenging times and you're down in the trenches, we've spoken about this on the pod before, I kind of love it in a way, because it forces you to sort of reassess things, and then you look back and you become stronger over time. So seeing everything as, right, this was meant to be, okay, what can I learn about this experience?
Yeah, I agree. And the funny thing is, I was actually speaking to my friend about this, and she kind of asked me, like, how are you after, like, you know, putting your mum into rehab and, you know, having these situations around you happen. And I just said, as a human being, like, it gives me even more of a purpose to talk about my truth. It gives me even more a purpose to educate people around addiction. I don't look at it as a way of like, oh, now I'm going to go drink and do drugs. And that was the solution to my problem years ago, because, you know, we love to self-sabotage as human beings, but we also love to sit in our shit. Because when we sit in our shit, we love to feel sorry for ourselves. And that's what as human beings we love to do, right? We love to look at the negatives rather than the positives, because if we look at the positives, then we're growing. And when we grow, we're taking ourselves out of our comfort zone. If we're staying in our shit, we're not going anywhere, right? So it's much easier to drown our sorrows in running away and addiction and eating disorders and stuff like that. And it becomes a habit and a mindset and a process that, you know, at the time, it feels good. It's feeding us in a weird way. But actually, when you take a step back and you actually push it, and when I talk about the pain into purpose, and I'm not trying to say the topic I've had before, but that purpose that you have is beyond anything before. And I talk a lot about purpose because it was the purpose that I had at 18 when I started working with Amy Winehouse's parents, going into schools and doing talks around addiction, right? That I found my purpose, which is speaking and sharing. And I started to do it for years and years and years, and motivational speaking is my passion. And I talk about purpose as like, purpose is the reason to get you up in the morning. And if you don't have a purpose, then it's very hard. And the hard thing about my mum is that she didn't have a purpose. And I look at her and I'm like sad for her because she doesn't have that purpose. But also at the end of the day, it's like you can't force anyone to have purpose. But when you do have purpose, you wake up to live. You know, and I have purpose. I wake up every day and I want to eat well. I want to look good. And it's not like ego, but it's how it makes me feel. There's a huge link with how it makes me feel to the purpose. And I did a talk the other day and I came off the call and I was like, I had the most unbelievable high because I knew that I was helping people. And that's my purpose.
And I think for men especially, I think a lot of the difficult times comes because perhaps we don't have that purpose, whether we know it or not. I think a lot of the time we're stuck and we're unmotivated and we're procrastinating because that vision, this idea of where we want to go isn't clear enough. And I imagine in relationships as well, I think a man's biggest fear is that he's not very useful, right? Or he's not working towards something, he hasn't got his mission. So I wonder how people can cultivate that. I think from from my experience, I've certainly found mine now, and it's helping other men. And I think a lot of men do wonder, how can I find that?
Yeah.
I think rather than trying to find that purpose, I think it will naturally find you once you start sort of working on yourself a bit and you start showing up to the world authentically as you, rather than trying to find something and like obsessing about a purpose. I think, right, focus on yourself, becoming the best version of you. And if you don't know who that is, start thinking about it. Who's the best version of yourself? Take elements of people who you're inspired by, right? Okay, what qualities do they have? What qualities do I want? Start embodying that. And I think the more you work on yourself, naturally, I think you're going to have a clearer headspace to then figure out your purpose. And I also think another element to that on a sort of more surface level is just try anything, just do random shit. And
Agree.
it might be your thing, it might not. Who gives a fuck? But just try shit out, and then that will lead you to the next step and the next step. Same as relationships, right? You might date someone for a year, 5 years, 10 years. Even if they aren't the one, cool. They've showed you perhaps more about yourself, and it's then another step towards finding that person, perhaps. Or I think in all these different areas. But I wonder if you found that to be sort of a similar element for yourself, because your purpose, again, coming back to the bad times, it's derived from your own experience, right? So
Yeah.
your hardship has led you to your mission.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think that I had purpose in my younger years, but I think that my purpose that I had was the wrong purpose. And this is what he spoke to about like alignment of values. And I think, and I work on this with clients, right? I ask them what their values are. And I see a lot of their values that they have are very different to what they're doing and being. And then when you don't have your values aligned, do you know what you don't have? You don't have your true identity. And when you don't have your true identity, you don't have your true authenticity. And when you're not having your identity or authenticity, you're actually lying to yourself. And when you're lying to yourself, you're hiding. That's why a lot of people aren't living their truth and they're hiding.
And a lot of men that I speak to, one of their big goals is to form more meaningful connections. Well, guess what? And I'm speaking from personal experience. If you're not being authentic and you're not showing up in your most authentic self and you're hiding parts of yourself, then that's going to become your external reality, right? You're going to attract people who, and it's not their fault. For a long time, I resented people. I thought, why won't you understand me? Why won't you connect with me on a deeper level? I was projecting onto other people. The reality was, I wasn't being my authentic self.
Yeah.
I was putting on this ego, this mask, and that's why I struggled to connect with people. So, yeah, I think authenticity always wins. And if it's uncomfortable to be authentic, that's probably a sign that you should be doing it more. And there's a step-by-step process. I look at it as like a 4-step framework usually. So one is, right, okay, awareness, because sometimes we don't even know we're not being authentic. But people-pleasing is a big one that I focus on, all these different stuff. Then I think, right, responsibility. You talked a lot about this victim mindset, very easy to do. But once we, as you know, blame other people or governments or whoever it may be, we're giving the power to them and they're not going to change your life, only you are. So I think after awareness, responsibility, once you're taking responsibility, action, just fucking go for it.
Yeah.
Do your thing. Do the things, or start acting like the best version of yourself. Start doing the things that you say you're going to do. Build that self-trust. And then after that, it's just, number 4 is just authenticity. Because at that point, it's just, okay, you're embodying that version of yourself all the time. And once you are then authentic, I think that's where everything starts to align. Because you're operating out of love and you're being yourself. And then suddenly, I think that's where all the jigsaw pieces of the puzzle come together.
It's not as easy as you think, though.
Oh, not at all.
I think that you got the authenticity, because I've had this, and I'm truly authentic to who I am. I mean, by the age of 21, I stopped wearing makeup. I didn't really care about dressing in heels. I stopped surrounding myself around, these people or whatever. But the journey is the day-to-day. The day-to-day when you walk in a room and your authentic self, and there's people around you that may not accept you. They may not like you. You may not get a job for being authentic to who you are, because the mask that people put on is only because they know that mask is going to get them somewhere, And some people don't actually understand authenticity. But the true journey and the true understanding from years and years of me doing that is actually you don't need to get everyone's approval. And when you start to, and I talk a lot about acceptance, accept that actually you may not get that job, you may not get that thing, but trusting it. Like, honestly, we're talking about, truth. I struggle in relationships. I struggle with men, right? And I struggle with men, and I love to talk about this because I'm very honest about this, is I struggle with men and physically with men, because the role reverses, and I'm a female that's strong. I know what I want. I know who I am, and I'm 31 years old and I'm single. And I've struggled, and I've literally put myself down from it, and I've, tried to change myself within the years, and I've tried to, mold myself in the years by being quieter and not being loud. The reason why I'm sharing this is a lot of females will understand this, right? Is they try to put on that mask to be liked by men. And when I talk about acceptance, is I talk about actually, I'm 31 and single. And I've accepted that I'm 31 and single. And whenever I get rejected by a guy, I actually take a step back and I go, that's not right for me. So it's the same alignment with everything I'm talking about, is actually, when you get offered that job, I take a step back and I go, that's not for me. When I get rejected by a guy, I take a step back and I go, that's not for me. It's about trusting that there is something that is going to be for you, but also knowing that, not everything in your life is going to be perfect. Not everything in your life is going to be, oh, I've got this, that's amazing. Like this, it's about looking at the things that you do have rather than the things you don't have. And the authenticity is amazing, and being authentic is amazing, but actually accepting where you're at and what you have in your life and the things that you may not have is so important. Because what I see a lot of people doing is I see a lot of people going, oh my God, I'm 31 and I'm single, I'm never going to get married, I'm never going to have kids, beating themselves up about it. Like that's the thing. And actually just going, it's okay. And trusting that you're an amazing person for who you are. You'll find that right person. You're going to grow within that, whoever that person is. And I've actually done work on myself with this. And I'm at a point in my life at 31, I'm actually like, I'm going to find the most amazing person. And it's because of my authenticity, but also my self-esteem, my self-worth growing and believing and trusting the journey. So I want to just challenge you there, that it's not just about the authenticity, it's about actually accepting your authenticity and knowing that actually not everyone is going to agree with that.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with that. And I don't actually think they're, mutually exclusive things either, right? But I think, if you can, I think a big part of being authentic is just owning your truth regardless of what people will think, right? But I think that's a huge point. We've got to accept that, like when we were younger, we probably were being authentic and we were shut down, and that's where a lot of the wounds come from, right? So I think acceptance is huge, and like we've discussed before, I don't think it comes instantly. I think it is a process, and I think
it's the resilience where I think that we can either let a situation knock us. And just going back to the men's stuff, because I love to share about this stuff, because I've been recently talking a lot about this, because I like to talk about my truth, and I like to talk about, like I've had people say, oh, you have the most amazing life, you're 31 years old, you live in Barney, and I'm like, no, like I do have an amazing life for what my life is, but there's things that I don't have that I, want, right? And I before, in the last 3 years, like, would get down about being rejected by men, or get down by being ghosted by men, or get down by being single. And in the last 2 years, I've really accepted that that's where I'm at, and that's okay. And I want to share it to women as well, to know that you can be okay at 31 and be single and trust the journey of, it's like, just because you don't have that doesn't mean that you're not an amazing person. Because I see a lot of women that do think, oh, I'm not an amazing person because I am single. And that's just one thing, right? But at the end of the day, it's like, you have to back yourself. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to trust that, everything is in its own time. But society may think differently. And that's the difference between the authenticity and the society, because the society has one way of being, and maybe your authenticity is the opposite. Maybe your authenticity is, I don't want that, or your authenticity is, it may not happen for me, and that's okay. But just believing that it's okay is so important, and trusting that it's okay is so important, because I don't think enough females talk about it. I think there's a lot of shame in females talking about it, because I think that I think that we are scared to say that we struggle with that.
I wonder, do you think that's why men then struggle with relationships and building meaningful connections? It's because there's this, both sides are maybe trying to fit in with societal expectations,
100%.
right? So I think the guys are like, right, I need to have a million, be worth £1,000,000 before the age of 30.
Yeah.
And because naturally that, the chances of that happening are, I'm not saying it's not possible. Of course it is. Anything's possible from our point of view. But point is that it might take you a bit longer, right? If that's your goal, and that's cool. There's also this, again, for men, right? You've got to settle down and have a family, right? I think it works both ways, and perhaps that's why in the dating space, I think a lot of men struggle, and women, I think, because they're both trying to live up to expectations that just aren't right for them. So I think it is tricky when that's been our belief system for all of our lives, right? But yeah, I think in terms of cultivating that acceptance, is it, like you were saying, just resilience? So a lot of the time we perceive even like rejection, for example, like you've mentioned it a couple of times. I think even if you're sort of showing up, and I think there's this big, what I see from the men's side as well in the dating space is that a lot of the time men can be very needy. And I was very needy for a while, meaning that if you're on a date with somebody, you'll be thinking, rather than, oh, okay, is this person right for me? They're thinking, oh, does this person like me? And it'd be interesting to see if you've observed that in the dating space, because that's what I see is where, rather than just being authentic, coming back to that again, a lot of the time it's like, okay, right, does this person like me? And then they sort of shrink themselves to try and fit in. And perhaps that happens on both sides, where a lot of the time we're like trying to be liked. It comes back to that sort of fear of rejection. And then when you're doing that, I think that's why a lot of connections don't happen, because you're not just being polarized, you're not being you. And, you might even miss out on a fantastic connection by doing that, right?
Yeah, I fully believe it. I feel like if we're not aligned with ourselves and we're not like truly believing in our self-worth and our self-esteem, and we like back ourselves, I think what I see with a lot of men, from the outsiders, I see that a lot of guys are scared to get hurt, scared to get vulnerable, and they have this element of armor and this shield that they're meant to protect, and if they can't protect and look after this person, then they just back away. And in my case, I talk a lot about feminine, masculine energy, and understanding that women are meant to truly just be feminine and men are meant to be masculine, and if there's a role reverse, it's very hard. And I find it hard because I have a very feminine energy, but I also have a masculine energy, and I feel like guys sometimes get intimidated by me because of that masculine energy, because they're like, I can't protect because it affects their self-esteem and their self-worth. But naturally, like, it's not really about that. But what they don't do is they don't communicate. And I think the lack of communication is so important. And within my experience with relationships and men is they just don't communicate things, because they're so scared to communicate and get vulnerable. And then when they don't communicate, they just disappear. And actually, like, it shouldn't be like that. It should be like, this is how I feel, this is what's going on for me. But that shows vulnerability, and vulnerability shows weakness. And then, yeah.
But then I also think it's got to be the right woman that they're vulnerable to, right? And
100%.
when I say right woman, it's okay, is that woman emotionally mature enough to handle that? Because if they haven't perhaps worked on some of their own wounds, then I think men will build up the courage to be vulnerable, and that's what I've learned from my own experience, that vulnerability is key, but it has to be the right woman, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a challenge for men, is that, right, you hear all that, it's very confusing, I think, because it's like, right, you hear being vulnerable and then don't be vulnerable, but then someone might actually practice it and then they might not get the response that they were looking for perhaps, and then they might scare people off because they're not ready to hold that space. And yeah, I find this really fascinating, and I think it's a theme at the moment that people are talking about in the dating space, where men are confused what they have to be. We put very high expectations on ourselves. We feel like we've got to be earning, a certain amount of money to impress women. And the reality is, we've got so many options these days in the dating space. So I think a lot of men have got great intentions, and I think this can work both ways. But I think a lot of the time it's very easy to spot sort of red flags and icks in people. But I think there's a reason why they're noticed a lot of the time. I think a lot of the time it can be a projection perhaps, because I think everyone's a mirror. Point is, I wonder just how many, I think it's just really difficult, like how many dates do you have to go on to sort of find what's right for you. I think because we have so many options, it's very easy to spot these things and go, okay, nah, not for me. And I think that's why a lot of men struggle with, I think, rejection, and because they'll go on one date and then they might not have another one, and then there's this other option. It's just all this noise. I'd be interested to see if you had any sort of perspectives on that.
Yeah, I think the new Gen Z and the new world that we're in is making things really difficult. I think back in the day it was quite simple to, just look at that person and meet that one person, and we didn't have access and choice to things, right? Like, we didn't really have social media, we just go to school. We just went to a school and we just met a partner and we're in our village and that was it, and I look at my parents and I was like, it's quite easy back then, whereas now it's like, guys are liking your stories and liking your photos and you're going on dates with them and then they're like, I'll see you again, and then they're just looking at your stories. Like, this has happened to me in the last month, right? They're like, I want to see you again, and then they're just stalking your stories, and I'm just so confused. And I'm like, what is it that, I'm just talking about my truth, right? Like, what is it that is going on here? But maybe they're scared to get vulnerable. Maybe they want me to chase them. Like, you just don't know, right? And it's because they have so much option, and they have so much opportunity to just look at your life online and what.
Oh no!
But this is the situations that I go through, and I'm like, I'm just confused. Like, but anyway, like, my dating life is just a very interesting one. But yet again, I like to share it because I want other women to listen to the journey of it, and know that, like, it's a big topic at the moment with women in their 30s navigating relationships and being single, and I like to talk about, like, as an addictions counsellor, as a motivational speaker, I don't like to talk about, like, my whole life being rosy. I like to talk about my struggles, right? My main struggle is my relationships with men, and that comes from my own trauma and my own insecurities and my own stuff from my childhood. And I'm in a really good place in my life, and I'm open to meeting someone, but it's so hard. But when we were talking about authenticity and we were talking about truth, my truth is, I grew up, and I'm trying to learn about this a lot, but I went to a really good school. I came from a nice Jewish family. I live in a very nice area in a big house. I've got 2 brothers and a sister. My family was quite like the beautiful family growing up. My dad's a business owner. My brother's an entrepreneur. Like, I've got a very glamorized life at home, and I've got a lot of amazing friends that live in that world. And I'm trying to still, within me, and learning about my struggles and my insecurities, I'm still trying to not go on a date with a guy and think about how much money they make. Are they going to fit well in my family? Are they Jewish? Are they, are they going to mesh into my life? I still struggle with that, and maybe that shows on them. But I think that it's the opposite as well. I think a lot of other people are the same.
And I think the authenticity aspect you mentioned, coming back to that again, you mentioned, right, you go on a date, you say that they'll say that they want to see you, right? Get it out. But here's the thing. And this is why I say to guys, right, again, this is why I truly believe authenticity always wins, right? If you genuinely like someone, again, you tell them that you like them, then act that way, right? If you say you want to see someone again, then go and see them. And I think, I spoke with my friend Yuri on the podcast as well, and he said it very well. It's like, right, whatever you do, whether it's a career, whether it's a relationship, you've got to be 100% committed to it, I think. Right? So you fully grab onto something, you fully experience it, and then you fully let it go when the time comes. And this is the issue I spot in a lot of guys, right? And I relate to it as well, is that, yeah, you'll go on a date with someone and there's interest there and you won't follow up. And I think a large reason for that is, again, there's so many different options.
Yeah.
And you're never going to be fully satisfied on a date, right? And this is why dating apps has its own pros and cons, and different people think different things about it. But ultimately, I think there's a disconnect there, because I'm in a fantastic, incredible relationship now. But I remember going on the dating apps, and if you were on a date with somebody, right, you could have a great date, right, really fun time. And then after that date, what'd you do? On the tube home, you're then messaging other people on the dating app.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck? There's such a disconnect there. And of course, you're never going to fully enjoy something, because you're always going to be thinking about someone else. And this is why I think men need to be more, we need to be more, can't have 1 foot in, 1 foot out type mentality, right? No, you've got to be fully committed to something. Give it your best shot. And that goes for your career. It goes for relationships, everything. I think that's super, super important. We've covered a lot of ground today, and I don't even think I formally introduced you. I think we're just talking.
We just started speaking.
Yeah, so I'll handle that in the introduction.
Yeah.
As well. We've got a sort of closing tradition on the podcast. We've got 2 questions that we ask every conversation.
Yeah.
And then one which is asked by one of the Growth Voyage listeners.
Nice.
Which is cool. The first one is a song recommendation.
Oh my God. I'm obsessed with Sia. I love Chandelier, but the piano version.
Piano version?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also Bird Set Free, Sia. Just inspirational. She's also sober. Sober.
Okay.
Yeah, this cough is not going.
Hey, it happens.
It happens.
Number 2 is a book recommendation.
Subtle art of not giving a fuck. Forgot who it's from, but yeah, it's a really
Mark
good
Manson.
book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a classic.
It's a classic.
I love that. And ties into what we've been discussing today, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah, big time. The third one is a question from a Growth Voyage listener, and this one comes from Gus Bliss, who asks, if you could have one attribute that people remembered about you when you were gone, what would it be and why?
Oh my God. I'm gonna cry. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I think the one thing that I pride myself on is that I'm nice to everyone, and I'm like even like I went for dinner last night, and this girl, she came. I just met her for the first time, and she was like, "You've got the most incredible energy," and like, I would love to be known as that person who lights people up in the room. And I do get people say to me that like people are drawn to me, just the way that I am, and I think it is because I'm authentic and I don't care about trying to be someone that I'm not. So I wish that if I died, hopefully not anytime soon, that I would have helped and I would have changed people's perspective on the way that they are living and being.
Yeah, I think that's lovely, and always comes down to authenticity as well, right? And yeah, absolutely love that. And yeah, I've obviously, yeah, we'll get into that bit about sort of the work that you do and all the stuff that you're doing. I think because this podcast is dedicated towards men, and because of the work you do, I'd love to hear if you had any advice maybe for men, whether it's to do with addictions and that type of thing, or anything in particular that you've observed from...
Yeah, I think that you're right when we were talking about men and their ego and their pride and the way that they should be. And I think that, do you know what? Most of my clients are men. And a lot of my clients that are men are all very successful men that have made a lot of money, that are doing really well, but they experience a lot of burnout and they don't know how to feel feelings. They don't know how to be true to themselves. And I think that because you're chasing this element of like strength and resilience in work and ethic, and not actually like, choosing to feel the emotion and actually realizing that actually like there's no such thing as being a man, that's when you can truly try and avoid those elements of addiction and burnout. Burnout's huge in men. And suicide is huge in men because people just don't feel their feelings. Men don't feel them feelings. So I think it's important to really start to get in touch with your emotions and be okay with failure and be okay with, not getting everything that you want or succeeding the way that it should be, and also not comparing yourself to other men as well. And yet again, the acceptance thing of accepting where you are at this moment in time, like there's no right or wrong way. You don't have to be a millionaire by 60. I know a lot of millionaires that are depressed, by the way. It's not something that you should amount to. It's about waking up every day and truly being happy.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much we were discussing before the pod as well, these illusions of the external stuff and all the societal expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've touched upon a great thing there, and I think also just being in touch with your emotions as well. And I think a lot of men might not necessarily know where to start with that. Do you think it ties back to what we were discussing earlier about being alone and really just monitoring everything?
Yeah.
I think perhaps that's the way forward then, I think. And yeah, in terms of your work, where can people find out more about you?
My name is Lauren White. I'm a motivational speaker, addictions counsellor, and an influencer. I usually use my platform to talk about addiction, talk about sobriety, educate people on truth. That's what I love to share about. I take on clients to work with just battling that type of addiction, any type of addiction. It could be work, it could be stress, it could be people, it can be food. I help people with self-esteem, self-worth stuff. And my Instagram is I am Lauren White. My website is www.laurenwhitespeaker.com. I've been in a lot of publications. I've done a lot of festivals, done a lot of talks globally. And when people ask me what my next steps are, I don't actually give a fuck. Don't care. Just going with the flow.
Take it every day as it comes. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to swear.
It's it's no PG nonsense here, so all good. Lauren, thanks so much. Learned so much from today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Been a pleasure. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Wicked.